The alarm had been going for 6 seconds before anyone spoke. 6 seconds doesn't sound like much. But on a station like the Sovereign Cradle, where every system ran on automated monitoring, and the alarm threshold was calibrated to filter out everything below a genuine emergency, 6 seconds of continuous alert meant something very specific. It meant that whatever had triggered it was real, confirmed across multiple independent sensors, and not going away. Commander Relith Voss was the first to reach the tactical display. Her crystalline fingers moved across the controls with the practiced efficiency of someone who had run this chamber for 200 years. She pulled up the sensor readout and looked at it. Then she looked at it again. Single contact, she said. Human vessel. Dropped out of faster than light, traveled directly in front of the station. Directly in front, said Fleet Admiral Kren Moth from his seat at the far end of the table. His species communicated through electromagnetic pulses that their translation units converted into sound. The pulses were doing something right now that the translation unit was rendering as skepticism. How directly, 10 kilometers off the bow, Relith said. The chamber went quiet. The Sovereign Cradle was 52 kilometers in diameter. It housed the governing body of the Galactic Accord, the alliance of 12 species that had administered this region of space for 3,000 years. Its hull was composed of layered alloys that had taken 8 centuries to develop. Its defensive grid could track and neutralize targets across 1,000,000 kilometers of space in any direction. And a single human ship had just appeared 10 kilometers from its hull without triggering a single advance warning. Pull up visuals, said Speaker Varan Solth. Varan was the oldest member of the Accord's ruling council. Her species, the Keth, experienced time differently from most. She had been alive for so long that historians disagreed about her exact birth date. She stood at the head of the chamber table, her tall gray form perfectly still, her 4 eyes moving between the tactical display and the main screen as the visual feed resolved. The human ship was white, sleek, approximately 200 meters in length. Compared to the Sovereign Cradle, it looked like a piece of debris, like something that might have broken off a larger vessel and drifted here by accident. It was not drifting. Incoming transmission from the human vessel, said the communications officer. Put it through. The screen changed. A man stood on the bridge of the human ship. He was wearing a dark gray uniform with a single designation on the collar. His hair was silver. His expression was the kind of calm that you develop not by having nothing to worry about, but by having worried about so many things for so long that you've reached the other side of it. This is Captain Doran Hess, he said, United Earth Defense Force. I represent Earth and its colonies throughout this region of space. He looked directly into the camera. I'm here because the Accord sent a transmission to Earth 68 hours ago. He paused. We've had time to consider it. I'm here to deliver our response. Speaker Veron leaned forward slightly. Captain Hess, we appreciate your arrival. However, the terms of our transmission were quite clear. We expected a formal written acknowledgement from Earth's governing council, not a personal visit. Our response is personal, Hess said. He did not seem concerned about whether the speaker appreciated this. We felt the situation warranted a direct conversation. Fleet Admiral Mouth's electromagnetic pulses were doing the skepticism thing again. The transmission we sent was a straightforward communication, he said. We outlined our position regarding human expansion into contested sectors. We offered a clear framework for compliance. What exactly requires personal clarification? Hess looked at him for a moment. Admiral, your transmission told us to abandon 17 colonial settlements, surrender our faster-than-light research data, relocate approximately 4 million people to designated reservation worlds, and submit to ongoing Accord oversight of all future human activities. He paused. Which part of that did you think wouldn't require a conversation? The terms were generous, said High Director Fessa Orvath. She was from the Velen species, which communicated through color shifts in their skin. She was currently a deep, authoritative purple. We offer you survival as an integrated species under Accord guidance. Many civilizations have accepted such arrangements. Captain Hess, said Veron, before the admiral or director could continue. We understand that this situation is difficult. The Accord does not take these decisions lightly. But humanity has been expanding into sectors that were claimed by Accord member species before your civilization achieved interstellar travel. That creates a legal and territorial problem that requires a solution. Hess nodded slowly. I understand the argument, he said. I want to be honest with you, Speaker. We've heard versions of it for 9 years through 7 separate diplomatic contacts. We understand your position. We have considered it very carefully. He looked at her steadily. Our answer is no. The Sovereign Cradle's council chamber had hosted negotiations between star-spanning civilizations. It had seen species surrender their independence, declare war, collapse into alliances, and dissolve into history. In 3,000 years, it had never hosted a 200-meter ship crewed by 160 humans who had just said no to the combined governing authority of 12 ancient species without raising their voice. The silence lasted a long time. You understand, Fleet Admiral Mouth said finally, what refusal means. I understand what you believe it means, Hess said. He glanced at something off camera, briefly, just a fraction of a second. Then he looked back. Speaker Veron, I want to say something before this conversation goes further. Because once it goes further, it's going to go somewhere that I think you won't be able to reverse. Say what you need to say, Veron replied. Earth has known about the Accord for 93 years, Hess said. We detected your observation probes in our solar system 11 years after we achieved faster-than-light travel. He let that land. We didn't announce that we'd found them. We studied them instead. We learned everything we could about the civilization that was watching us. We learned your languages, your political structures, your military doctrine, your fleet positions. He paused. Your weapons capabilities. High Director Fessa shifted to a darker shade. That is not possible. Our probe technology is undetectable by any species below. By any species below what? Hess asked. Below your assessed developmental level. He looked at her calmly. I think that's one of the assumptions we need to talk about. What do you think Earth had been hiding all this time? Write it in the comments below, because what Captain Hess said next changed everything. The Accord's emergency session had been running for 4 hours before anyone proposed using the primary weapon. It was Fleet Admiral Moth who said it first. He said it in the measured, logical way that his species approached most problems. They had a weapon. The weapon had worked on 14 previous occasions. The situation called for a demonstration of consequences. The conclusion was straightforward. The weapon in question was mounted in the Sovereign Cradle's central spine. It had taken 300 years to develop and another century to deploy. It drew power from a contained stellar process channeled through focusing arrays that occupied the station's entire midsection and delivered an energy output capable of eliminating a planetary surface in under 30 seconds. The Accord called it the resolution device. Most species who learned about it called it something shorter and less diplomatic. 14 worlds, Speaker Veron was saying. In each case, after the demonstration, the situation was resolved within 72 hours. Hess's ship is still sitting 10 kilometers off the bow, Relieth noted from her station. He has not moved. He hasn't responded to our last 3 communications. He's waiting, Veron said. For what? She looked at the tactical display. She wasn't sure. That uncertainty had been sitting in her chest since the moment he said our answer is no. Without any hesitation. She had heard species refuse the Accord before. She had never heard one refuse it like that. Like the refusal was the easy part. Like, the part that came after was the part they were actually prepared for. Activate the resolution device, Mouth said again. Target Earth. We send the charging notification to Hess immediately. Give him 30 minutes to reconsider. The process requires 22 minutes to full charge, the weapons officer said. Then we begin immediately, Moth replied. The notification goes to the human ship as soon as the sequence initiates. The countdown creates appropriate urgency. Varan looked at the main screen, at the small white ship sitting quietly in front of her station. Begin the sequence, she said. The Sovereign Cradle's midsection began to hum, a low, resonant sound that traveled through the hull and into the bones of anyone aboard. The focusing arrays drew power from the contained stellar process. Energy readings on the station's internal displays climbed steadily. The weapons officer announced each percentage as it was reached. 10%, 20. The numbers were calm and regular and inevitable. Transmission to the human vessel, Varen ordered. Inform Captain Hess that the resolution device is charging. Tell him he has 30 minutes to broadcast Earth's unconditional surrender. Message sent. The communications officer confirmed. They waited. 40%, 50. No response from the human vessel, the communications officer said. He's not going to respond, Relith said quietly. She had been watching the human ship on the visual feed. It still hadn't moved. It was just there, a white shape against the black. Patient. 60%. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced, from Captain Hess. The screen shifted. Hess was standing in the same position as before. His expression hadn't changed. Speaker Varan, he said, I see you've initiated the charging sequence on your primary weapon. I want to make sure I understand your plan correctly. You intend to fire on Earth as a demonstration of consequences. That is correct, Varan said. You have 28 minutes to prevent this. Hess nodded slowly. I want to tell you something about Earth's defensive systems. He clasped his hands behind his back. You've been monitoring our planet for 93 years. You've observed our orbital installations, our surface defenses, our patrol craft. You've built an assessment of what we can and can't stop. Yes, that assessment is based on what we've been willing to let you see, Hess said. There's a difference. The weapons you've observed in our solar system are what we use for training, for routine patrol, for situations that don't require us to show anything more. He looked at her steadily. Your weapon will fire in approximately 27 minutes. I'm telling you now, not after that. It won't reach Earth's surface. 80%. The hum in the hull had become something you could feel in your teeth. You're claiming you can stop it, Moth said. I'm stating that it will stop, Hess replied. I'm not making a claim. I'm informing you of what will happen so that when it does happen, you have the context to make a better decision. No defensive technology can stop stellar-level energy output, Fessa said. The physics are fundamental. The physics you understand are fundamental, Hess agreed. He said it without any particular emphasis, just as a factual distinction. Which brings me to the second thing I want to tell you, he continued. After your weapon fails, you're going to have one opportunity to reconsider your position. He paused. I genuinely recommend using it. The transmission ended. 90%. The resolution device was nearly ready. The focusing arrays were glowing on the internal cameras. 3 centuries of engineering and a century of deployment history. 14 worlds, 0 failures. Varen looked at the tactical display. She looked at the small white ship. She looked at the countdown on her screen. 22 minutes, the weapons officer said. We are at full charge. Fire, Varen said. The resolution device discharged with the collected power of a stellar process. The beam traveled at light speed across the void toward the small blue planet that housed 7 billion humans. The energy output was precise, the targeting flawless. In 30 seconds, it would reach Earth. In 4.7 seconds, it stopped, not deflected, not absorbed, not scattered by interference. It stopped, as if it had reached a wall made of nothing, dissipating into background radiation 10,000 kilometers above Earth's surface. The planet continued its rotation. The clouds continued their slow circulation above the oceans. Nothing on Earth's surface showed any indication that the most powerful weapon the Accord had ever built had just been fired at it. The council chamber was completely silent. Weapon status, Veron said. Her voice was very steady. The weapons officer answered slowly. Primary cannon functioned at 100% efficiency. Full charge confirmed. Beam traveled 4.7 seconds before terminating. Target showed 0 damage. He paused. I have no explanation. Find one, Moth said. The Seth tactical officer, whose 6 limbs were designed for parallel processing of complex data, was already running every analysis available. There are no detectable defensive installations around Earth, she reported. No orbital platforms, no energy emitters consistent with defensive arrays. No artificial constructs within the beam's path. She looked up. There is no explanation for the beam's failure that falls within our current theoretical framework. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said quietly. Hess appeared on screen again. His expression was the same. His voice was the same. That was lesson 1, he said. Earth's defensive systems have been in place for longer than your council has existed. They were not built in the 60 years since we achieved faster than light travel. He let that sit. Lesson 2 requires you to look at your tactical display. Every alarm on the Sovereign Cradle activated simultaneously. Relith moved to the tactical display before the sound had finished processing. What she saw there made her stop moving entirely. The display was filling with contacts, dots of light appearing throughout the system. Not approaching from outside the sensor perimeter, appearing, already positioned, already present, as if they had been here the entire time, waiting for a signal to become visible. Report, Varian said. Relith's voice was careful and precise because it needed to be. Energy signatures appearing throughout local space, multiple contacts. I am counting them now. The number kept climbing. 200, she said. 500. The contacts multiplied across her display, each one registering power signatures that her tactical computer was comparing to Accord vessels and flagging as exceeding them. 800, 1,000, still climbing. How many? Moth asked. 1,000, she said. Still detecting more. 1,200, 1,500. The chamber was completely silent except for the sound of the sensor systems processing new data. Relith watched the number climb. Each new contact appeared at a position that, looking at the tactical overview, she realized was not random. Every Accord vessel in the system was surrounded. Every station, every installation. The human ships hadn't moved into these positions in the last few minutes. They'd been in these positions before the conversation started, before the resolution device fired, before Hess's ship appeared 10 kilometers off the bow. They've been here since before this conversation began, Hess said from the screen. Since before we received your transmission, actually. When your ultimatum arrived, our ships were already in position. They were waiting to learn whether we'd need to use them. 2,000 contacts, Relith said. Her voice was doing something she couldn't quite control, still detecting more. High Director Fessa had shifted to a color that wasn't in Relith's standard Velen emotional reference chart. That means these ships were traveling in stealth before our transmission. They were already preparing. We've been preparing, Hess said, since the day we found your probes. 2,500. Admiral Mouth stood from his seat. His electromagnetic pulses were doing something his translation unit was struggling to render. How is this possible? Our detection systems have a range of what you've told us they have, Hess said. He walked to the window of his bridge. Outside the window, Earth was visible, small and blue and quiet. You know what our sensors detected. You don't know what our sensors can detect. He turned back to the camera. The ships you've been watching for 60 years are our training fleet, our reserve craft, the vessels we let you see when you were running your observation probes through our system. Relith pulled up a comparison feed. The human ships on her tactical display were nothing like the vessels the Accord's intelligence files described. These were different in every measurable way, different hull geometry, different drive signatures, different weapons configurations. 3,000 contacts, she said. Those are the actual ships, Hess said. We've been building them for 80 years, in locations your probes never found. He paused. We knew this conversation was coming eventually. We've been getting ready for it since before your current speaker was appointed. Varen looked at the tactical display, at the 3,000 human vessels surrounding every Accord asset in the system, at the planet that had just absorbed a direct hit from the resolution device without registering any damage, at the small white ship sitting 10 kilometers off her bow, exactly where it had been since this started. Patient, waiting. She thought about what Hess had said. 93 years. They had been watching the Accord for 93 years, learning, planning, building a fleet in hidden locations, developing defensive technology that shouldn't theoretically exist. Waiting for a conversation that the Accord had apparently made inevitable. What do you think humanity was actually building for those 93 years? I want to know your theory. Write it in the comments right now. How deeply, she asked, have you been watching us? Hess looked at her. We know your fleet positions in every sector, he said. We know your weapons inventory and operational status. We know your supply lines and the vulnerabilities in them. We know your communication encryption, including the updates you installed last year. He paused. We wrote the code for those updates. You purchased them through a third-party technology broker. The broker was one of ours. The chamber was very still. We know that 3 of your member species have been privately discussing withdrawal from the Accord for the past 20 years, Hess continued. We've been having quiet conversations with their governments. We know that 2 of your client civilizations have been building unauthorized military assets in outer asteroid belts. We've offered them protection agreements. He looked around the chamber at the various alien faces watching him. We know your council's internal voting records for the past 4 decades, including votes that were conducted in closed session. Fleet Admiral Mouth said nothing. For the first time in this conversation, he had nothing to say. 3,400 contacts, Relith said quietly. The number had stopped climbing. She looked at the tactical display. Every Accord vessel in the system was enclosed. Not threatened, just enclosed. The human ships weren't moving aggressively. They were simply there, watching, waiting. The way you wait when you already know the outcome and are simply letting the other party arrive at it. What do you want? Varen said. Hess answered without hesitation. To be left alone. He said it the way someone states a fact, not a demand, not a threat, a fact. Our colonies grow in peace. Our ships travel where they choose. Our people live under their own government. He paused. That's all we've ever wanted. We didn't build all of this because we wanted to conquer anyone. We built it because we needed to be certain that when someone decided to threaten us, we would be ready. He looked at her with that same steady calm. And if we refuse, Moth said. The pulses carrying his words were very quiet. Hess's expression shifted slightly. Just slightly. Admiral. In the past 4.7 seconds, you have seen Earth stop your most powerful weapon without any visible defensive response. You have watched 3,400 ships appear from positions inside your own formation without triggering a single alarm before I gave them the signal to become visible. He paused. What exactly do you think refusing accomplishes? No one in the chamber answered. You have 24 hours, Hess said. Evacuate this system. Broadcast your acknowledgement of human sovereignty to every system in your network. Walk away from the 17 colonial settlements you demanded we abandon. He clasped his hands behind his back again. In exchange, we will not pursue this further. Your territories stay yours. Your member species stay your member species. The Accord continues in its current form. He paused. Your other option is to learn what happens when you push a species that has been getting ready for this specific conversation for 93 years. The transmission ended. 23 hours and 41 minutes later, Speaker Varan Solth stood at the central console of the Sovereign Cradle's council chamber and looked at the 12 species arrayed around the table. The discussion had lasted most of the day. It had not been calm. There had been arguments and proposals and counterproposals, and at least 2 genuine diplomatic incidents that would require separate follow-up conversations. There had been one extended period, around the 14th hour, where Fleet Admiral Mouth had argued with such sustained intensity for a military response that the translation unit had started flagging the emotional content of his pulses as outside normal parameters. But the tactical display had not changed. 3,400 human ships motionless, surrounding everything the Accord had in this system, the planet Earth rotating quietly in the distance, completely undamaged, and the small white ship 10 kilometers off the bow, still exactly where it had been since the beginning. The vote took 11 minutes. It was unanimous. Varen activated the long-range communication array. The transmission would reach every inhabited system in the Accord's territory within hours. To all civilizations within the Galactic Accord's community, she said, by order of the Council, effective immediately, the Accord formally recognizes the sovereignty of human space and all human colonies. She paused. The 17 contested settlements will not be subject to relocation or Accord oversight. Human ships will travel freely throughout previously disputed sectors. All prior demands relating to human military and research capabilities are withdrawn. She kept speaking for several more minutes, outlining the new boundaries, establishing the diplomatic protocols that would govern future interactions. When she finished, she closed the array and looked at the tactical display. The human ships were still there. Then, slowly, they began to disappear. Not moving, not jumping to faster than light, simply disappearing from sensors the same way they had appeared, one by one, and then in groups, and then all at once. The tactical display cleared. 3,400 contacts gone. Only the small white ship remained. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said. Hess appeared on screen one more time. He looked the same as he had at the beginning of the conversation. His expression was calm, not triumphant, not gloating, just calm. Message received, he said. Thank you for your cooperation. He paused. For what it's worth, Speaker, this was the outcome we hoped for. He looked at her steadily. We built everything you saw today because we needed to know we could. We've spent 93 years hoping we'd never have to use any of it. He reached for something off camera. Safe travels, he said. The transmission ended. The small white ship vanished from the visual feed and from the sensors simultaneously. One moment it was there, then it was not. Varan stood at the console for a long time after the display cleared. In the following days, more information emerged about what humanity had actually built. The hidden fleet was not 3,400 ships. That was what Hess had chosen to reveal. Intelligence teams working with whatever data they could access suggested the actual number was significantly higher. Their installations, once their existence was confirmed, and their locations partially mapped, extended across 47 star systems. Their defensive technology, the thing that had stopped the resolution device 10,000 kilometers above Earth's surface, was still not understood. Accord scientists had been studying the energy readings from that moment for weeks and had produced 17 separate theoretical explanations, none of which were fully satisfactory, but the most unsettling intelligence was the simplest. In reviewing decades of communication records and diplomatic interactions, Accord analysts found evidence that human representatives had been quietly building relationships with member species and client civilizations long before this confrontation, trade agreements signed through intermediaries. defense consultations offered through unofficial channels, technological assistance provided to civilizations that hadn't asked the Accord for help because they'd been quietly told about an alternative. The Accord had spent 60 years watching a primitive species develop and had never considered that the primitive species might be watching back, preparing, building alliances, developing technologies that shouldn't exist yet, waiting. Speaker Varan recorded a private entry in her personal log on the 7th day after the confrontation. "We made a category error," she said. "We classified humanity as young because they achieved interstellar travel recently. We assumed that young in space meant undeveloped. We saw their early ships and assumed we understood their capabilities. We saw their divisions, their hundreds of separate governments, and assumed that division meant weakness." She paused. "We were looking at the visible surface of something and assuming we understood the depth. A species that has survived what Earth's historical record shows it has survived does not stumble into the stars unprepared. It arrives ready. It has always been ready. It has been ready since before it left." She stopped the recording, looked at the empty tactical display that had held 3,400 contacts for 24 hours. In the years that followed, the galactic balance shifted quietly. Human diplomatic missions arrived at former Accord client worlds with partnership offers. The Accord still existed, still governed its core territories, still administered its ancient systems, but its authority as the uncontested power in this region of space was simply and permanently over. Hess gave one interview to a human journalist 6 months after the confrontation. He was asked what he had been thinking during the 22 minutes the resolution device was charging. He thought about it the way he seemed to think about everything, like the question deserved an honest answer. "I was thinking about the 93 years that went into that moment," he said. "All the people who built the defensive systems and the fleet and intelligence networks, all of them knowing this conversation was coming eventually, all of them working to make sure it went the right way." He paused. "I was thinking about how I hoped it would end without anyone getting hurt. And I was thinking that we'd made sure whatever happened, it was going to end on our terms." He was asked if he'd been afraid. He was quiet for a moment. "Not of losing," he said. "We'd made sure that years ago." He looked at the camera. "I was afraid they wouldn't take the way out we were offering. I was afraid we'd have to show them more than we wanted to." They asked him one more question. What was humanity's actual military capability? The full extent of it. He smiled. It was a quiet smile, the kind that doesn't need to be larger to make its point. "We showed them enough," he said. That's all anyone ever needs to know. The journalist noted that the smile stayed in place for a long time. After the interview ended, Earth continued its rotation. The clouds moved across the oceans the way they always had. And somewhere in the spaces between stars, ships moved through the dark on routes that no one else could track, watching everything, saying nothing, as they had been doing for 93 years and would continue doing for as long as they needed to. Which was, if anyone had been paying attention, exactly the point.